Hey all, today we are going to do module 1.4. We are going to talk about inverses and kind of talk about how to find them, what to do, etc. So our goals for today are to be able to understand and explain what an inverse is mathematically, be able to find the inverse of points, and then to be able to find the inverse of a function. So we're going to be doing all of these things and figuring out both what an inverse is, what we do with it. The inverse of a point or a function is a reflection across the xy line. So for example, if you have a graph, the xy line is right here. So you would be reflecting whatever is over on this side across the xy line. So it's going to kind of turn, okay? If you folded your graph along that dotted line, you would get them to touch and they would look exactly the same and like a pineapple. An inverse reverses the domain and range of the function. What was the domain before now becomes the range. What was the range before now becomes the domain. Let's start with some points. So the inverse of the point, we're going to switch the domain and range. So the point A at 5, 3 becomes the point A prime at 3, 5. So it's over 3 and up 5, here it is. Remember, if I'm drawing this XY line, notice that A prime is simply reflected across that XY line from A. B is at negative 3, 1. We flip those and that becomes 1, negative 3 to get B prime. So over 1 and down 3, and here's B prime. C prime, I'm going to switch again, so negative 4, negative 6. And negative 4, negative 6 is over here, and that's my C prime. You can see that my line is a little crooked, but that C prime is a reflection across the XY line of C. D prime, if D is at 0, negative 3, then D prime is at negative 3, 0. So right here is D prime. And then E prime does not change. 0, 0. Notice even if I flip those, it still says 0, 0. So E prime is right on top of E, which makes sense. You can't reflect it over the line that it sits on, okay? So it stays in exactly the same spot. Our last point is F. F prime becomes negative 5, positive 4. So negative 5, positive 4 is F prime. All you're doing is taking the points and reversing or flipping the X and Y. You're not changing any signs or doing anything like that. You're just reversing the X and Y. What was X becomes Y. What was Y becomes X, and that gives you your prime, okay? So finding the inverse of a point is not terribly difficult if you can just remember to switch the X and Y. Finding the inverse of a function is a little more difficult, and we generally do this algebraically. And you can kind of follow the steps that I've outlined right here. So our first step would be to substitute y for f of x, which has already been done for us here. The original problem was probably f of x equals 4x plus 5. So step 1 is to substitute that in. Step 2 is to flip or exchange the x and y. So instead of y equals 4x plus 5, now I have x equals 4y plus 5. Notice I just switched their positions. Now I'm going to take what I have here and I'm going to solve to get the y by itself. So first I'm going to subtract 5, and then I'm going to divide by 4, and I get y equals x minus 5 over 4. My last step is to substitute the inverse f, or f to the negative 1, back in for y. Remember how we talked about functions are named? This first function was named f. The second function is simply named inverse of f. That's what that negative 1 means. So if f of x is 4x plus 5, the inverse f of x is x minus 5 over 4. Okay, so again, we're just naming our functions. And then when we find the inverse, that negative 1 tells us that it's the inverse of the original f function. Again, I hope that makes sense to you. And if you have any questions, let us know. We are more than happy to help. Otherwise, have a rockin' day.